Hello, thanks for stopping by. My name is Jerrel from Sungrand Studios. I'm a commercial games developer. Today I'll be taking a look and performing an analysis on the Last of Us Remastered PC port. A few months ago, I did an analysis on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the launch day builds, and I'm working on an analysis of the patches that have made some adjustments to those Pokemon games. But today I'll be taking a look at The Last of Us. Now, I don't actually have a copy of this game, so I can't play it myself. What I will be doing is I'll be looking at some uh, a video that people have posted online. I had an extremely busy last few months. I was launching the very final games on the Wii U and 3DS eShop, so it has been extremely busy for me. So I haven't had time to play any games. Yeah, if you do want to request that I analyze a particular game and share my analysis on that, I do have a Patreon that you can contribute to, and through the Patreon, people can request games, and then the Patreon will go towards me purchasing those games because I don't really want to spend money on games I'm not personally going to play, as I have a very long workday with game development, so I don't actually have much time to play games. So if you do want to see me cover more games, the Patreon is a way for you to make that happen. So let's get started here. So I've just briefly skimmed through these, but I just want to preface this by saying I don't know anything about their development environment for The Last of Us. I know that it was a PlayStation exclusive. I played the original on PlayStation 3. So what is happening here? What I believe is happening here. So I don't know anyone from the Last of Us development team. I don't know anyone from the team that ported the games to PC. But what I see happening here, so the terrain, there would be a system that manages the terrain, um, and this system looks as though terrain is loaded in chunks, and they're generally high resolution. Um, you can think of them as high resolution bitmaps, and they store the data for the terrain in colors, and they're not compressed. Otherwise, that would result in issues. So they're slower, or they're much more memory demanding. So what I believe is happening here is the game has first loaded in all of the resources and assets necessary for the models. And in this situation, it looks like the system that's running this on it's likely out of RAM, and it just isn't loading the textures into memory, or it's under significant um, RAM pressure, or memory is not being handled uh, efficiently or well, and memory is fragmenting. So if there is available memory, that large bitmap basically that stores the data for the terrain can't fit in anywhere into memory, because memory, it's a bit like Tetris. So that's what I see happening here. This is the issues that I'm going to point out are things that I have not played the PlayStation 5 version, but from my understanding, from what I am hearing, these issues don't occur on the PS5 version. And the reason why this is important is because the PlayStation 5, this game was designed for the PlayStation 5. So the developers know exactly how all of their systems work. They know exactly how much memory they have to work with, and they know exactly how much time it takes for each asset to load in. There's a few issues here that I'm going to discuss as well that I can offer some insight into. So this is just typical AI. People like to post this sort of stuff online because it's very funny, but I don't have any particular insight to offer into that, other than that's just how video games act sometimes. This is just general combat. This I don't have any particular insight on that stuff. So this is something that I've seen occur in places. So what's happening here is that a character is trying to blend from one animation into another. And what I've noticed through other clips that I've seen briefly is that this T pose tends to happen. So this, or it's an A pose. This A pose happens when the character's animation that they are trying to blend to is not loaded into the memory in time. So there's a fascination. So this is the cause of this issue. We have a fascination with getting rid of load times. We're sick of it. We don't want to see load times anymore. We just want to play our game. And that's generally why we ended up with games creating this tiny little, hallway. And uh-oh, a bunch of furniture has fallen through the hallway. I better very slowly, squeeze through this hallway, and it's going to take me 30 seconds. And that way they can try to unload the assets from the previous environment and load the assets into the next one. That's one way to deal with it. Another technique that developers use to load assets into the game is asynchronous asset loading. And that's where asset loading can occur during gameplay while you're doing other things. But here's the thing. On a PlayStation 5, the developer can predict the behavior of that hardware. They know exactly the timing of asset loading, streaming assets, how quickly it takes, how quickly they can load certain assets in. On a PC, when everyone's got different hardware, the GPU, the CPU, your RAM, things are very different. Things can be much slower than the intended hardware that people are, it would be ideal if people used, the exact same hardware that whatever development team ported this game to PC. It's not going to be the same as everyone else's, so the timing is going to be significantly different on everything. So the systems that were created to load assets asynchronously in the background, so you can keep playing, and you don't have to wait for loading screens. That means that the bare minimum is loaded in, and while you're playing, the game will ask for things, and then the game engine and the game framework will go and load those things in. So it'll say that it started this environment, it's loaded the bare minimum, the character is able to walk around, but now the character needs to, say, for example, they have a reloading animation or an animation where they take an item out of their bag or they're aiming it. Well, that actually hasn't been loaded into memory yet, and the framework and the game engine are now trying to get that animation data when it's asked for. So it's asking for that animation data, but it still has to take time to load it. It has to locate it. And if there are other things going on in the game environment, they're going to get in the way. They're going to slow everything down. So that's what I see happening here is the game is asking for an animation on the spot, on the fly, and the engine is trying to load it, but it's already doing a whole bunch of other things, and you cannot predict what other things are going to happen. That's just how it works. There could be way more other things happening than expected. There could be AI, there could be enemies running their AI routines. There's physics calculations. It could be loading other assets simultaneously. The enemies could be loading their animations. The game could be trying to stream audio on multiple um, audio players. It could be loading in high resolution textures. It could be loading in ambient sound effects. It could also be loading the higher resolution textures for certain objects. So objects generally get loaded in at lower resolution, and then as you get closer, the game will ask to load in the higher resolution stuff. So all of those things get in the way of loading just the one thing. If it was loading just the one thing, it would probably be just fine. But again, we're in a situation where now we don't know what hardware the user has, and it's probably slower than the super duper mainframe that the developers are using. And so now it's unable to load those assets in time. And especially when it comes to animations, um, it's not like a texture where it can just pop in. The logic for an animation says I need to transition from one animation to another, and it can't find that animation, so it just has this really just an A-frame pose or A pose because it can't load in that data. But according to the game logic, it has already loaded in. The character's already transitioned to the animation that they need to transition to, so they can't just suddenly pop in to the animation they need as it could with a texture or a higher resolution model. So that's what's happening in this situation. And we only ever see this in like short bursts or whatever. So if the character were to leave that animation and try to enter that animation a few times more, it's likely it would load that in. And again, I don't have this game, so I can't test that myself. So I'm just running this through YouTube. So that's my insight on what I see there. What I see here is a situation of the hardware um, facing too much memory pressure, and that character model it's likely disappeared from memory pressure. So it happened, um, and it could also be a culling issue as well. So I don't know anything about how these games were made. So I have two ideas on this thing. I believe that um, as Joel runs upstairs here, it's likely that the game has hit a collision threshold, and that collision threshold um, is loading in assets on the top floor because the game expects this as the only way to access the second floor, and there's likely going to be high resolution assets up there. So once he has got to that top floor, it is likely loaded more assets in, and whatever system this is running on has faced too much memory pressure, and it's just dropped uh, the model. It's dropped the model data and the texture data for the character because it's just has too much to deal with. So it's just dropped that model entirely. It's sort of like forceful culling. It's possible that's what's happening, but again, I have no idea what game engine they're using. I have no idea what framework. That's just my guess here. I'd like to give it more of a deeper analysis. I could make a more informed analysis if I had the game myself. So I'm a bit misinformed when it comes to what's happening here because I can only see what's happening for a few seconds. There is another um, there's another potential cause to this that I'm shooting from the hip here. I could be totally off on this one. I'm just letting you know because I've got no idea how they made this game. But it looks to me as this guy hits the second floor, that's when he disappears. So this could be a manual optimization to where if enemies are, say for example, too far or they're on separate levels away from you, this could be an optimization. So the game tries to hide enemies that are on different floors to try to save on rendering time. Um, There's no reason for something like that, say, for example, on a PS5 because it's so powerful, but on PCs, you need to take into account weaker hardware. So it is possible that the developers implemented a manual culling system and it's not functioning correctly here. So it may think that Joel is still on the lower floor and now the enemy has gone to the upper floor and it's made the enemy invisible to try to cut down on rendering time. But again, I could be totally off on that because I can only judge on what's happening based on the few seconds here. So there's some guesses there. Again, another invisible enemy here. Let's see. So let me see what's going on here. I have never seen this. Right. So I'm going to assume that Ellie is not normally allowed to go into the water here. I've played the game on PS3. I don't remember this part. So I'm assuming this glitch is related to just using the dumpster. And what I'm going to guess is that there's here's my guess because I've only seen this for a few seconds, but I'm going to put this out there. I believe there should be an invisible wall that stops Ellie from passing through this, but she appears to have a physics simulation based connection to the dumpster. The dumpster is not on the same gameplay object layer. So generally you define your objects through layers so you can carefully control interactions. So if I had an invisible wall, I would say the invisible wall can only interact with the player character. Other objects like enemies and physics objects can still pass through that invisible wall. So what I believe is going on is Ellie is now has physics logic, and she's attached to this. She's attached to this dumpster, and so I believe the dumpster is allowed to pass through the invisible wall, and it's actually pulled Ellie through the invisible wall that would normally stop her, and she's not supposed to be able to get that far. So there's no logic there, and she falls through the earth. So I'm not 100% confident. Again, I'm not able to play through the game on my own, so I don't know what is going on here. Let's go ahead and switch to another video. So again, this is not my video. This is a video from HD Playground if you'd like to see the source video there. I'll go ahead and switch to, let's see what we got happening here. So this is, I've heard this, people wait a while for their shader compilation. So this is something I'd like to discuss um, by showing you some examples as well. I can actually show you how this happens and why this happens, but I'm going to wait until I get to the hair that we've seen. Okay, I'll move forward a little bit. Okay, so we have these hair cards. I've heard of these characters just getting their clothes all soaked. So I would like to have a closer look at those hair cards, though. I know we've seen them in other scenes here. I think there's another video. I'll just swap over to another video here. Um, where is it? This is and this video is from Beta Brawler. I'll go to theater mode. So let's go ahead and have a look, and I'll show you an example. So this it seems like an absolute nightmare, and you might wonder, how can that even be possible? How can that happen? Surely they know what that looks like when that happens. So let me show you how easily this can happen. So I discussed previously um, how the game is loading in assets asynchronously. It is not loading all of the assets in through one single loading screen. Um, See, what's starting out here is that it's cut to a different scene, and suddenly it's now it's got these. So these are called hair cards, and hair cards are geometry that allow the artist to express hair. So you need to have a texture applied to those hair cards to make it look like hair. So I'm going to bring up an example from some of my game development. So I'm just going to open an example character here. All of these characters use hair cards, and all of the settings need to be very specific. They need to be fine-tuned in order for them to work correctly. So I'm just waiting for the Unity game engine to catch up. Uh, Here we go. So I'm going to click some of my hair here. So that's what hair normally looks like. It's quite simple. Uh, so I'm going to show you what happens when you remove the textures. So I'm going to bring in the settings here. So if for some reason this texture, okay, that disappeared. Let me go ahead and move that over. Right. So if for some reason the textures for the beard were not able to load in, I'll show you what that would look like. So this texture here, this one, if I can move out of the way, this one explains to the game the transparency and the color of the hair. So if I remove that, we're going to have flat, um, pretty much flat, rectangles, but they're still normal data, so you can see a sense of depth. But say the normal data is not able to load in as well. So now I no longer have a normal, and I no longer have color data, and you have hair cards, and that's what we're seeing. So what I see in the footage is also hair cards of different colors. So from my understanding, I don't believe that the hair is controlled, the color of the hair is controlled through the texture. I believe they have a programmatic shader. So the shader, for example, if I change like that, and now you can change the color of that character's hair in game, which to me tells me that they're probably focusing on extremely high resolution um, transparency and normal data. And because they're using such high resolution textures to convey normal, which is the bumpiness and the transparency, I believe that's getting stuck in the asynchronous asset loader, and that's causing issues. So I'm going to undo that and get my, and say, if I didn't have asynchronous loading, if I just said, look, the player's just going to have to wait a whole minute. I'm sorry. If they want to play a game, they're just going to have to wait the whole minute. And by the time the game loads, all of the assets are loaded in, and there won't be any visual issues. But if you say, don't worry about it, go ahead, just play the game, and we'll load the assets when you need them. The problem is the game has to load in every single asset at the same time now, and they're all competing for processing. So that's how you're running into issues and you're displaying hair cards, and they're just getting stuck in the system. So we also saw an issue. Let's go ahead and bring this up as well. So now we have, was it this guy? We have issues like this. And I'll show you how easily this can happen. This again comes down to asynchronous asset loading. So I'm going to click on the logic for the skin, and you can see the data here. I have metallic data and I have the albedo data. So the albedo is basically communicates the color, and how um, what that looks like, the detail, the color of that geometry. So I'm going to say that let's say the game wasn't able to load in the albedo data, and it's likely that that shader may not even have fully initialized, or the color data is actually tied directly to that map. So what's happening is you're going to end up with something like that, with absolutely no color data. There is no color data whatsoever. That's what happens when your albedo map hasn't loaded in, and your character will look like that. And it's very likely that the metallic map, this tells the game how shiny certain parts of the body need to be. And I have mine set up so that if characters end up, walking through water, getting rained on, they can get shinier. So let's say that hasn't loaded into the game either. And now we have this extremely shiny, um, colorless character where there's no color data, and the shininess just goes, all right, let's max that right out. So you can see how easily this can happen. And that again occurs because the textures that are supposed to tell the game what color and what shininess the geometry should be are not able to load into the game. And it's because it's competing with so many other assets that are trying to load in. And once it does load in, you see you have a character that makes sense. So that's what we have going on there. Let's go ahead and have a look at a few more instances. So this is interesting. So again, we have hair cards. This to me tells me that um, this character's hair is using multiple textures, and again, they're likely multiple very high resolution textures. They were all competing, and only some were able to load in. So it could be a matter of um, again, hardware can always come into play, but people are saying that they have powerful machines, they have heaps of RAM. So it looks like the asynchronous loader, the asset loading logic that works perfectly on the PS5 because it was designed explicitly for the PS5. It's possible that the team that brought this to the PC were using the same logic, and it really was not designed for other hardware other than the PS5. So it is not performing well, and it's not performing correctly on other hardware other than the PS5. I don't actually know what they're doing. Maybe they created their own asynchronous asset loading logic. So again, this is another instance of a character who is not able to load in her animation. It is likely that because these characters are transitioning, I'm slightly familiar with this scene. These characters are sort of walking out of this alleyway. They're going out into this more open area. So it is likely the game on the fly has been requested to load in heaps of data. Like the floor actually looks kind of low resolution as well. These textures look very low resolution to me. So to me, this says that it's likely that the person playing this game is playing it on hardware that probably doesn't have a huge amount of RAM, and so likely what's happening is the game is now trying to load in all of these assets on the fly. It's loading in the textures, so it's either trying to load in this animation and getting stuck, or it actually just can't. There's no room left for it, so the game says, too bad, no memory left. I can't load that in. We're just going to roll with it. And that's what's going on. She's using inverse kinematics, and her leg is popping up on that because it has detected a surface. I believe her animation, if it had loaded in, I think she's leaning up against this or something. I think that would have shifted her body forward, and the placement would have been just right. So if her animation worked, she would be resting up against that, and it wouldn't push her up because her animation manually shifts her body forward. But because that animation hasn't loaded, her body is now pushed on top of this in order to make the animation work. Again, if the animation loaded, this is the position she needs to be at for it to work, but it didn't load in, so it's pushed her on top of that. So let's see here. We have people going in and out. So I, I'm not 100% sure what's going on. This is something that I would need to play myself to really understand. But I believe when they compiled this game for PC, they probably, um, I'm not going to say they messed up, but I'm going to say that there is an issue with the script execution order. So the order in which you or execute logic, or a logic execution, um, uh, is out of order. So often in game engines, for example, in Unity game engine, you can define the order in which the game's logic is executed. So the script execution order is extremely important. What I believe is happening is on the PS5, their script execution order was correct. It would say process the car's position and any logic related to the physics calculation and the car. And then after the car has had its calculations finished, then you calculate the logic that puts the character in the seat. What I believe is happening here is the logic that um, determines where to put the character. So that's happening first. I could be wrong because again, I can't actually play this myself. But I believe the logic that tells the character go to this seat, that's happening first. So the character is saying, okay, I have to go to this exact spot. And then after that, in the exact same frame of gameplay, the car is now being moved. It's calculating physics. It's adjusting itself. So I believe that is what is happening here. It's uh, a script execution order issue. Um, and I'm trying to determine the frame rate here, but I can't really tell because it looks like that was recorded on a phone. So it is likely that a low frame rate is causing issues with the logic. So again, this is an issue that doesn't occur on the PS5 because the developers know exactly how the game will run on the PS5. They know the performance will be just right. This is likely physics that is tied. There's either game logic or physics logic that is connected to the frame rate. When the frame rate drops, because the developers can no longer predict the frame rate at which the end user will be running the game, if you have a machine that for whatever reason the setup is not running at the right frame rate, then logic is not occurring as often or as quickly as it should, and that's how we're ending up with issues like this, where now things are slipping through the cracks. So again, it would take a huge amount of work because you need to reprogram your entire system so that it does not rely on the frame rate. You can check for any frame skipping that's happened, and you can tie the logic to that. But that has not happened in this case. Um, it's that it's pretty likely that is what is happening. So let's see what's happening here. Okay, so I'm not okay. That one's generally going to make me laugh. So it looks like she's supposed to keep moving. Uh, okay, you got me. You got me. I do not know what just happened here. I've never seen this glitch before. This is my first time seeing it. It's pretty funny. So, okay, I've got it. So, um, the animations in this game are tied to locomotion. Uh, So when you have characters who use root motion, or game models, game logic that use root motion, in Unity it's called root motion, and so that means that the character's actual movement, their logic in game, is actually determined by the animation, and so um, that makes it so your characters can have perfect lifelike movement. As they step forward, the amount that they move will always be perfect. It will always look like their foot is planted on the ground. That is the benefit of root motion. What I see here is a character whose animation didn't fully load. It looks like the animation partially loaded, or she's trying to transition to a different animation. If I can see what's going on here. No, see that other character. I forgot her name. I don't know if she's meant to slow down. So let's go ahead and have a look at this. If she walks. Um, hold on, I can't see. Okay, so that's not even. It doesn't even look like it was a full cycle for the run animation. Yeah. So here's what could be happening. Um, For some reason, the animation is not looping. There could have been some sort of memory corruption, um, or logic corruption. If that occurs for any reasons, For some reason, the game thinks that this is not a looping animation. This is a one-time animation. If that is the case, then that's why she's stuck in place. She can't actually move without her animations. Um, Conversely to that, either the animation has not fully loaded, or she's trying to transition to a different animation to change her movement style, and that has failed to load, again, for all of the reasons that we already discussed. I went over it a bunch of times. I'm sure you don't want to hear me explain the same thing again and again. So she cannot move without that animation because she is using root motion for basically perfect animation. So either she can't load her next animation, or it's not looping the one animation that it should be using. And so she's stuck there. The way to fix this is to have um, game movement logic that is not tied to root motion. But from my understanding, the entirety of The Last of Us, the game logic is tied, the movement is tied to root motion, and that helps it have this super lifelike, very realistic uh, uh, look to the animations. Unfortunately, in this case, not being able to load in that animation has resulted in Ellie not being able to move forward. This, uh, it looks like so I'm sure there's a preset for the setting that says turn up the bloom. So the sensitivity and the intensity of the bloom should be maxed out. Maybe when a character is getting hit and close to death, their the camera's bloom settings that make it bright and blurry, maybe that should be maxed out. Again, I haven't played the game myself. I've only played the PS3 version, so I don't know what's going on here. This I believe this is what it looks like when a man's soul leaves his body and he's been a good man and he's rising up to heaven. I think that's what's happening here. Okay, sorry. Sorry. Okay, I genuinely haven't seen this one yet. Okay. All right, let me so I believe he's trying to climb. It's hard to say what's going on here because I can't play that myself. I believe it's just not loading his climbing animation, and the climbing animation is tied to the logic of him moving there. So the game logic, again, the timing on the PS5 is perfect every single time. It can never go wrong. I believe the logic manually moves him upwards, then it switches to the climbing animation and it moves him forward. And the logic, because now there's a mistiming, that can't happen. So I believe that's what's happening. Again, I don't have that much more insight on that. Um, Again, this looks okay. Again, this is tied to uh, the game logic being tied to the frame rate. I believe because the frame rate is so low here, that is causing this to happen. And again, there very well could be a logic execution order mistake. Um, so the logic that says to move his daughter, her name is Sarah, I think. The logic that says to move Sarah to Joel's position is likely occurring in the wrong order. But I believe much of that physics calculation logic is tied to the frame rate. So if the frame rate is not absolutely perfect, when you move too fast, the movement skips some logical steps, and then the physics has to try to catch up. I believe that is what is happening here. Okay. So again, this is the video title is in defense of, and I'm not saying that it's okay for this project to launch, but I hope I'm able to help you understand that it's not that simple. There isn't just a button that you press that says make this work. Um, that's unfortunate. Okay. This is from Varun J. I'll try to link. I'll put the link to these videos to give people credit here. And I suppose I'll finish this clip and then I'll wrap things up here. So we've already discussed that. Let's see what else is going on here. That's very simple. That's very simple. The textures have not loaded in there. I'm trying to have a look here. It's hard to tell because YouTube has compressed this, to high heaven. But it is likely this machine that's running this just can't handle all of the textures. The asynchronous asset loader is getting stuck, and that is just not loading the textures in. That's the albedo data. Okay. Um, yeah, you know what? Unity does that. Unity actually does that. That is that so I don't want to talk about the games that I've developed while I'm doing these in defense of videos, so I won't be doing that. But I have a game out on the Switch right now that does this exact thing, and it's very frustrating. Um, it is connected to physics simulation calculation. It has to do with clothing simulation and hair simulation, and for some reason. Like I've got a new version of Unity that I'm using that doesn't seem to experience this issue, but this is the game's trying to do too much, and I'm kind of looking at that. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be liquid in there. So this machine appears to be getting stuck, and it's not able to calculate the physics simulations in time, and the game is asking for too much. This looks like um, texture corruption. If you have a look at the pattern on her body, that looks like metallic and normal map corruption, which is strange because again, the game that I'm talking about that I've developed and launched, I think it was in 2021, I have this exact same issue that happens on my character models as well, and it's very frustrating. So that for some reason the it may have to do with compression, and the game engine is decompressing the metallic map, as I explained, that shows you how shiny things should be, and the normal map. It's corrupting one or both of those, and it's resulting in these weird patterns. And it's frustrating because as the game switches between what are called MIP maps. So MIP maps are lower resolution textures that the game engine generates so that as you get farther away from the character, the game engine will display a lower resolution texture for performance enhancements. But as it switches back and forth between those and it's decompressing, it appears to corrupt those textures, and you end up with this weird issue. So this is actually something that I wasn't expecting to see that. So that it's kind of interesting. This is where they get. See, I don't know why these characters have gotten soaked. Here's how I would imagine it works: is there's a a function they can call in the event system for this game, and if they call that function and say, okay, these characters they've been exposed to water, you know, or turn this character wet. Um, Perhaps when they were porting this to PC, maybe there was an error, there was a misclick, and someone accidentally activated the characters getting wet. I cannot guess why this is happening. Um, there could have been an object. So you say, for example, you have like a waterfall, or you have a lake, and you can have a logical collider in the waterfall that says if the character touches that, they are now wet. Maybe someone accidentally changed a collider to be to have that logic. It's possible. I honestly, what is going on? Um, it's something that can happen very easily, though. I believe it was a misclick from the porting team, and they've accidentally changed logic, because there's no reason why this would be happening. There's absolutely no reason for that. So it would be a game logic that was altered by mistake. Okay, uh, that looks like uh, that looks like her AI is trying to move to a particular spot, and the AI is just doing its best. It's doing its best to get there. I'm not sure if that happens in the PS5 version. Again, yeah, that looks like. Oh, you know what? That's not even a bloom issue. That's just not loading the textures. So I was wrong earlier when I said I was so blinded by the sparkly lights. So that isn't a bloom issue. That is just, it's plain and simple, hasn't loaded the textures, and it's possibly because the machine running that is out of space. It's run out of RAM, and it can't load any more textures in. So it's just given up. Okay, this frame rate's looking real chompy here. Let's see what the issue is supposed to be. Oh, is this sort of like, oh, this is the frame rate of the game. So, okay, I suspect that the game is now trying to load in assets, and it's struggling. It's now not able to handle all of the action and loading in more assets. It's likely loading in huge chunks of the terrain as well. And as I said, terrain maps tend to be uncompressed. They're just raw bitmap data, which is, it's big. They're big, and you got to load those into memory, and they take a while, and they can cause that slowdown. Let's see here. Yeah, that's pretty simple. It's just under the stage. He's activated his swimming logic. That's every game in the world does that basically. It's not a big deal. I mean, it is a big deal in that it shouldn't be happening, but there's nothing interesting for me to say about it, honestly. Let's see here. Yeah, and that's just, we've already gone over that. The game, I think the game, when it comes to the animations, if it can't load it in time, it gives up loading the animations, and that's causing these issues. Let's see here. Okay, what is happening here? This is recorded off someone's phone. They're running this on a, what are they running this on? Hard to see. Okay. I just want to understand what the world is about. I've gone silent. I don't know what's going on here. So I've seen a lot of glitches that look like this, especially with like Fallout. Yeah, it happened a lot in Fallout, didn't it? Fallout 76. We saw things like this in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But here's the thing. We have no idea what this setup is here. And I do know for a fact a lot of people were maliciously like using emulated versions of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and using mods and whatever to make the game do ridiculous stuff and to mess the game up because it's very funny and it gets people attention on social media if they post these horrible things here. Um, and unfortunately, that muddies the water between what is a genuine issue with a game and what is something that people have caused on purpose through modification because it gets them online attention. So I can't confirm what this is because I can't understand why the game logic would be doing this. But also as a gamer, I kind of love this and I think it's hilarious. I don't think I can offer any insight into this. I can understand in Fallout when people leave their power armor and then they turn into a Slender Man. Um, I don't know what's happening here. I've got nothing. I've got nothing for you. Okay, so I think that's everything that I've got to share with you today. I hope that was interesting to you. Again, if there are any games that you would like me to cover, please comment down below. And if you'd like to contribute to that, I do have a Patreon, which I will link to. And if we get enough people contributing, then I will pick up those games and I absolutely will cover them. It doesn't even need to be new releases. If you want me to go back and look at some older releases, if we can earn enough through the Patreon, and if people ask for it in the comments, I have had people asking me to cover the new Zelda game coming up. So I am going to pick that up for myself. So I won't rely on Patreon to pick that up. But if there are titles that people want me to cover that I don't have an intention of playing, then that's where Patreon does contribute to that. So again, I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not a content creator. This is not my full-time job. So I don't earn any money from making these videos. They're not going to be monetized because I'm a full-time game developer. So I don't exactly um, I don't exactly focus on creating videos like this. This is just something fun that oh wow, that's horrifying. Yeah, this is just something fun that people have asked me to do and share my input on. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I will link to these videos in the description to give them their proper credit. And again, this video should not be monetized in any way. There shouldn't be any ads, and if there are, it's because almighty YouTube has put those ads in there. Thank you for watching, and look, let's all just enjoy the games that we like. Let's have fun, and hopefully the teams can fix this as soon as they can. For me personally, like I don't know how they would start because I don't understand what game engine they're using. But the first thing I would do would be to disconnect um, much of the physics calculation logic. I would disconnect that from the frame rate because that looks like it's causing issues. Um, and I would change the asset loading logic. I would either use a different asset asynchronous asset loading logic, or I would do something different, because that's causing issues with the animation system. And the game logic is tied to the animation system. On PC, that's what's causing the issues. Anyway, I don't even know the development team. But good luck to you guys. I hope you can sort it out, and I hope you can bring PC gamers the experience that they're expecting. Take care, everyone. I'll see you around, and I've got a new video coming up for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the patches. Take care. I'll see you around.